All right, everybody, welcome back to the main stage here at the Boston Marathon Expo. We are joined right now by a race champion himself. He won the 1986 Boston Marathon from Australia, the great Rob de Castella. Rob, good day. How you doing, mate?
Hey, g'day, TK. I'm good, mate. Yeah, nice to be able to join you.
Rob, you are in Canberra in Australia. How's the COVID-19 thing going in Australia right now?
Look, it's okay. It's challenging. Sort of here in Canberra, it's not too bad. We haven't had any community transmission or active cases now for a week or so. So people are getting out and everyone's back at work, and cafes and restaurants are gradually opening up. Down in Victoria, they've had a little bit of an outbreak. So we've got some of our Indigenous runners that have been training up to do the marathon in November. So we've got two down there, and they're limited to only 1 hour of exercise a day. They're only allowed to go outside for 1 hour a day, and they have to stay within a 5 kilometre radius of their home, so 3 miles. So that's fine for most of your training sessions, but not very good for your long runs. So we're trying to juggle their training commitments so that they can still accumulate some long distance over the weekends. But I think people are getting tired of it all, but they understand that it's important, and everyone's sort of trying to stay positive. There's a lot more mental health issues, and I think that's one of the reasons why exercise and running during these times is so important, not just for our physical health, which we've all known about, but I think more so now than ever before for our mental health and well-being.
Right. One of the things we'll get into is the deep work you've been doing with the Indigenous Marathon Foundation now in its 10th year, I believe, right? Happy birthday. Yeah. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And you're referencing runners, Indigenous runners in Victoria, right? Who are in the state of Victoria.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like over the last 10 years, we've had 96 graduates that have come through our program, through our foundation. We're a health promotion charity or a not-for-profit. And we basically use running to promote healthy lifestyle, but also to create Indigenous leaders and to demonstrate Indigenous achievement and hard work and aspiration, and provide a platform for our graduates then to go on and start their own projects, start their own businesses, sort of address the issues that they're really passionate about. So as a lot of people probably aware, like most countries, First Nations peoples, Indigenous Australians have higher levels of chronic disease, shorter life expectancy, higher levels of suicide, incarceration, substance abuse. All of those markers are issues and areas that we try to address through creating aspirational and inspirational leaders through using the marathon as a tool for demonstrating achievement. Now, our guys go from no running to running a marathon in 6 months, and then there's obviously a lot of education and qualifications that go along with that as well. So we've got Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island runners from all over Australia, from little isolated, tiny, remote communities in the middle of the desert, maybe 200 or 300 people in some of the communities, through to the capital cities.
Great. The fill in the blank for me here. There are how many people in Australia, and then how many Indigenous people in Australia? So
Indigenous people, when we say Indigenous, we mean Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands. So the Torres Strait Islands are up in the far north areas of Queensland, over on the east coast, and Aboriginal Australians cover the First Nations people across mainland Australia, and they represent about 3% of our population. So they're a very small minority, but as I said before, are well and truly overrepresented in the health and incarceration and all of the other unfortunate negative statistics. And what I found is that a lot of that comes from a lack of courage or a lack of pride and self-worth. And if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have a sense of identity, strong sense of personal self-respect and personal sense of pride and accomplishment, then it's very difficult for you to have courage to take on challenges in your life. And those challenges are everything from getting a job to finishing your education to starting a business to, doing anything which takes you outside your comfort zone. You've got to have a sense of courage and self-belief to take on those challenges. And, all of us who love the marathon and all of us who love running know that when you do cross the finish line, especially of your first marathon, you've hit the wall at 30K, you're absolutely busted, you're down on your hands and knees. The thing that keeps you going is that inner sense of courage and self-belief. And when you do cross that finish line, that sense of pride, personal pride is overwhelming. And then what we try to do is to make our runners realise that that's just one thing, and they can replicate that in other areas of their life, and they can use that same approach to address the things that they're really passionate about stepping up and being strong and positive role models for their children, and taking on leadership roles within their community, and really sort of driving a positive change and a much better outlook for the next generations.
You have the program now in its 10th year. I think you receive about 150 applications a year from different young men and women who maybe I think they're between 18 and 30, who meet some criteria that you've set forth, like being able to run a little bit, yes, but also like having some drive and some vision for themselves, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when we first started in 2010, we struggled to find anyone who wanted to run a marathon. Running and the marathon was not part of Indigenous history, or at least modern history. They're incredible sportsmen on the football fields, playing AFL and rugby, and also basketball. You've got people like Paddy Mills. And he's an Islander, Torres Strait Islander. We've had sprinters like Kathy Freeman, won the 400 at the 2000 Olympic Games, but we'd never had an Indigenous distance runner, and so there was no tradition for them to follow. So back in 2010, it was a challenge to find anyone who wanted to train and to run, and the incentive back then was, we offered them a free trip to New York, and the chance to travel to New York, see Times Square, go to Madison Square Gardens, go to the Empire State Building, and in fine print, run the New York City Marathon. So we ended up with 4, and that was as good as we could find back then. And all of those 4 men started, and they all finished. And now, as you said, we're getting close to 200 applicants every year, and we select a squad of 12, 6 men and 6 women. This year, it's been much more challenging because obviously there's no marathons. New York's been cancelled. Boston's been cancelled or put online. And so the incentive to get a free trip to New York or to the US no longer exists. But we went out and we still selected. We selected our squad before the pandemic shut the world down, and every single one of the applicants that we selected said that it's not for them. It's not about New York. It's not about going to New York. It's about driving change and being those positive leaders for their family and community. So we're doing our program all virtually. We normally have 4 training camps. They do a certificate 4 in business. They do a level 1 coaching certificate with Athletics Australia. They do CPR and first aid certificates, and also an Indigenous mental health first aid certificate. So all of those education content is being delivered online via Zoom, and we're doing sort of these regular events instead of them participating in big events like the Sydney City the Surf, where they have over 80,000 runners. They get together in their communities, and their family hold the water for them at the water stations and cheer them on and stand on the finish line. And so they're missing out on all of the excitement of mass participation, but they're still running. They're still running the half marathon or the 30K or whatever it happens to be. And now they're sharing it much more closely with their family and their community. So, if anything, that's a slight positive that's come out of the shutdown that we've had here. So we're now doing a lot of little mini events where just a family and a small group of people come out and support them and participate with them.
That's great. Now they can see the look in their eyes at 30K of just
That's right.
as opposed to hear about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Hand them the cup of water. Here you go, mate.
Yep.
Hey, what percentage of your students are program members, I should say, are in urban areas versus rural areas?
We sort of, it varies a little bit. I mean, as you said before, we don't select them based on running ability.
Yeah.
So I don't care how fast they run their marathon. All I care is that they finish. And to some extent, I want it to hurt. I want them to struggle, because it's only when you struggle and you achieve your goal that you really appreciate how strong you are. So I don't want to train these guys for 4 years before they run their first marathon. That's why we do it in 6 months, because I know it's going to hurt them. I know that they're going to be really busted at 30, 35K. And that's when they're going to have to really dig deep. It's when, it's when you get knocked down and you say, I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep on pushing forward, that you really identify that inner strength that you have. So they basically get selected on their purpose, and their purpose is sort of the message that they'll write on the back of their hand, which might be a tribute to a family member who's passed away, or it might be their child's name, or it might be something which they're going to look at when they hit the wall, and it's going to give them that realization that they have to keep on going and push through. So they've got to have that strong purpose. And then from our perspective, we also have to see in them that they have a capacity to drive change. So they have to demonstrate that they can be these inspirational leaders that can take on a role as a champion and organise fun runs and create training groups, or go on and do business. We've got 2 graduates who are now studying medicine, who never would have contemplated taking on that huge challenge of pursuing a degree in medicine if it wasn't for the fact that we take them through the marathon project. So it's and they come from all over. We have, as I said, remote, isolated communities. We have country towns, and we have the big capital cities. And it is an incredible cross representation of Indigenous Australia that covers all of those 3 different areas, and also includes men and women, half men, half women, and Aboriginal and also Torres Strait Island.
They are remarkable Australians, remarkable humans, and you're to be commended for doing a job of getting them a larger piece in the conversation, and the respect, treatment, care, coaching that they deserve. And the ceiling is high. I mean, I believe it. These are. Indigenous Australians have been there for 60,000 years and have an unbelievable connection to the earth. And if you think about in the last 250 years, how that's all been flipped upside down, it's remarkable. And so it almost feels like a round peg in a square hole kind of thing. But there's success stories. There is good work being done, and you're helping to make it happen.
Yeah, look, it's as you said, TK, it's the oldest continuous living culture on the planet. 50, 60,000 years of culture and history and learnings. And it is a very different paradigm from our our white man approach, our civilization approach. They have different sets of values and different priorities. And I think we as a nation and probably as mankind can learn a lot from our Indigenous people. They have values. We're now all talking about the environment. We're talking about family and connections. We're talking about responsibility, looking after our elders and giving our elders a significant role in our communities and in our families. So if we can, as here in Australia, as a country, first of all, listen and learn, and then apply some of the teachings of our First Nations people, I think we can grow and we can be a better people for that. So there's a lot of values and a lot of spirituality that is very heavily rooted within our Indigenous people's culture.
We're going to be keeping tabs on it as it grows. IMF now in its 10th year. 10 years, that goes fast. Jeez. I mean,
yeah, it sure does.
And also, it seems like it's been around longer than that because of the magnitude of what you're doing. I was surprised to know that it just started in 2010. But good work and keep it up, Rob.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, will do.
I was putting together some notes, and I realized I don't know a lot about Rob de Castella before really 1983, 1982, and that's my own fault. But I guess just where were you born? What city sort of did you grow up in? And then what got you into the sport right off the bat?
Sure. Look, I grew up in Melbourne. I'm the eldest of 7 children. Had a wonderful family environment. My running probably started through my dad. My father had his first heart attack when he was 49, and back in those days, there was just starting, I think, to be the realization that running and exercise was important for your cardio health. And I was back in the Jim Fix and Nathan Prettigan and back in that era. And my dad was an eccentric insofar as when he decided to do something. One of his favourite sayings was, "If it's worth doing, son, it's worth doing well." and I think that's some of that's been passed on to me. But when my dad started to get into running, he became absolutely passionate about it. So he had his first heart attack when he was 49. He was already running little short fun runs and running sort of 3 or 4 mornings a week. But after his first heart attack, he started training even more. Went on to run about 30 marathons, and he was one of my biggest fans, supporters, advisors, and we did a lot of running together, driving to training sessions, and then I started doing cross country running at school when I was about 15 or 16. By the time I was about 16 or 17, I was winning all of the school and inter-school cross-country races. And then my career progressed pretty quickly. I started winning national junior cross country and then track titles, setting national 3K, 5,000, 10,000 metre records, and then represented Australia at the World Cross Country Championship when I was 20. 20. And then, sort of gradually progressed into the international area. I ran my first marathon in 79 as I was trying to qualify to make the Moscow 1980 Olympic team, and won the selection trial, ran 2:14, so qualified to represent Australia at the Moscow Olympics. It was a pretty turbulent time in global sport, and obviously with the US boycott of Moscow, there's a lot of lobbying and a lot of pressure placed on us as athletes here in Australia to follow the US boycott. But eventually we ended up going, so I competed in Moscow, finished 10th in the marathon over there, and that was the first of 4 of my Olympic Games. So went from Moscow then to Los Angeles in 84, where I finished 5th, and then 88 in Seoul I was 8th, and then I went on to Barcelona in 92, and I'm not sure where I finished. In the 20s somewhere, I think. I never anything outside of the top 10. I don't count.
20, maybe 26, but I know that's a heck of a run. 4 Olympics in the marathon, and geez, you must have enjoyed every one. I know the marathon's always at the end, so so you get to watch everybody else have a good time for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got to
right.
jump in.
Yeah. You don't want to stay in the village. becomes a party town.
Did you ever think about doing 2 events in the Olympics, like 10,000, or did you do it?
No. The marathon was enough for me. I know some back in those days, some of the 10,000 metre runners would front up and grab, if there was a spot in the marathon, they'd compete in that. But running a 10,000 metres prior to a marathon, if you want to do your best, I don't think that's really what you should be doing. So I just concentrated and focused on the marathon. After Los Angeles, where I was favourite to win it and ended up finishing 5th, probably because I overtrained in the 6 months leading up to it. But then I moved to Boulder in Colorado, and train there with all of the great Boulder runners of the era there. Frank Shorter was there. Rich Castro was a real running club guru there, who's still very active in the community. Arturo Barrios from Mexico moved in there. We had Steve Jones, Rosa Mota. A lot of international runners all gravitated towards Boulder, and we had a wonderful training group all through the North American, the Northern Hemisphere summers. So, and I was there for 5 years before I started to have a few injuries, and then moved back to Canberra, back to Australia, and took up the position as director of the Australian Institute of Sport that I held for 5 years, leading into when Australia won the Sydney Olympic Games.
Mm-hmm. Which must have been an enormous moment to not only win it, but then to see it all come to fruition in Sydney in 2000, especially from your vantage point, having competed in 4 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, and there's nothing as unifying for a city or a country as hosting an Olympic Games. The pride that every single person, every taxi driver, every person working in hospitality, the pride that they feel in terms of hosting the world to their city is something really, really special, and the vibe and the buzz in the air in this country, and especially in Sydney during the Olympics is something really, really special.
Certainly a point of pride, to be sure. The first time you ran, I mean, you got your chops and running through cross country, no question about it. And you went to World Cross a few times, but it was, I think, in 1983 when you that was one of you had a couple great rivalries. I think Steve Jones might have been in there. I know Salazar was in there, and I'm sure several others. But was that the first time you teed up against Salazar at that World Cross, or was Rotterdam
Yeah.
before that in '83?
No. The World Cross was before Rotterdam. So it must have just been a little while before. No, when was it? It must have been pretty close. But it was the first time in Gateshead when I met Alberto, and then we became really good friends for a long time after that. He came out here to Canberra and trained out here with us through one of our summers, one of your Northern Hemisphere winters. Steve Jones as well. He was around more so probably a little bit later. But that World Cross Country in Gateshead was something pretty special with Carlos Lopes and Jonesy and Salazar.
The hills in some of these cross country races are just the gnarliest things, and certainly you can see how you had such a strong Boston eventually in 1986 and powered through the hills, and we'll get to that in a second. But what were the 5 years you lived in the U.S.? Was that like 86 to 90?
Probably about 85 to 90, yeah. About 5 years, yeah.
Okay. So 1985 comes, you've now, you've gone through two Olympics, and LA was I'm sure disappointing, but you still picked up a ton of experience from doing that, and you had plenty of fast times ahead of you, as it turned out. But the training in Boulder, you have heard of Boston, and you've maybe considered running Boston, but it didn't really get on your radar or something you were going to consider until 1986, when of course it becomes a professional event, and Dave D'Alessandro from John Hancock gets on the phone with you, and what happens next?
Yeah, well, it was Pat Lynch. Pat Lynch flew to Europe when I was competing, I think, at one of the World Cross Countries over there, and I think come back from having a game of golf and walked into the hotel lobby carrying my golf clubs, and Pat was sitting in the foyer, and I think that was an immediate connection we had, because he was always a bit of a mad golfer as well, and then we started talking about the possibility of Boston. He was telling me the plans that Hancock had to really try to re-establish Boston as the premier marathon in the world. It had certainly been left behind a little bit in terms of the commercial development and the professionalization of running. We ended up then setting up a meeting, I think, when I was at Falmouth, maybe a little while later, and David D'Alessandro came down, and we sat down and we had a talk about again their plans and what he wanted to do. I remember saying to him that if all he's interested in is selling more insurance through exploiting the marathon, I wasn't really interested. But if he's really committed and serious about providing Boston with the opportunity to reassert itself and reestablish itself, then I'll come on board and I'll support and participate. And to David's credit, that's very much what he did. He really Hancock made a massive commitment to marathons, and I think ended up also supporting not just Boston, but New York and Chicago. I'm not sure whether they did any others as well, but their commitment to running and to the marathon was massive, as it still is through Boston. And then committed to doing it in '86. I remember sitting down having dinner I think the night before the marathon with Pat Lynch and David and our families, and I remember having a beer, and you know, Pat Lynch later told me that after the dinner, David pulled him aside and said, "Mate, what's going on here? We've just paid all this money to have Castella come out here, and he's not even taking this race seriously. He's having a beer the night before the marathon." And Pat Lynch's response was, "Just relax, David. He's an Australian, you know."
It just loading up. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's totally natural. Now, Pat Lynch was the guy who John Hancock used Pat Lynch, I think, for many years to retain and recruit elite athletes from all around the world. And this was the first go around with you guys and with you and having dinner with you. And I think Ingrid Christensen came in that year as well.
Yeah,
I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
And won on the women's side, and the race had taken a massive step forward. And to this day, Hancock remains very supportive of the race, the elite field, so many components of the race that were that exist today were built in 1986. It is a profound sponsorship, and you were right to ask, like at that time, like, are you guys in this or what? And certainly they are.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's wonderful to see that Boston has really reasserted itself, I think, as the marathon that everyone wants to run. It may not be the biggest marathon because obviously the course is limited, the roads are limited in terms of the size, but in terms of it's the marathoner's marathon. If there is a marathon anywhere in the world that any marathoner wants to do, it's their first choice is Boston, and I think it's wonderful to see that recognised and re-established.
How does it stack up in your mind in terms of just difficulty from the topography of the course? You ran it several times, but how in terms of all the races that you've run, I guess marathons that you've run, where do you feel it ranks in terms of difficulty?
Oh, look, it's tough. It's really tough. You know, the start, the downhill start is jarring, and then obviously the hills and the distance into the race where the hills come is really tough. From you know that last 8 to 10K is fast as well, and I think that's you know, that's a redeeming feature in terms of the course. You know, sort of once you get over the hills, you know that you've broken the back of the marathon, and all you've got to do is just hold your form and try to run as quickly as you can and smoothly down the hills. But it absolutely, it's a tough course, but it's got the tradition. You know, it's not like some of the other courses around the world where they've been deliberately designed to just run fast times. It's got a history and it's got a tradition and it's got a personality and a character, which you know, sort of which a lot of the other super fast courses lack. They all become a little bit sterile.
The race, had you seen the course before 1986? Had you trained on it at all, or were you coming into it kind of blind?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I think I came in a few months before and ran maybe the last 10K or something. But you know, I mean, a marathon's a marathon. 42K. You know, it's more about getting yourself into the best possible fitness and shape and condition that you can possibly be in, and then just running a smart race. But you know, sort of Boston is unique because of the hills. So it is, you know, I think I probably ran over the last, you know, section with the hills and stuff, and was, you know, probably only just once or so though. I didn't need to do too much.
I think you were the #1 ranked marathoner in the world at that time. Is that right?
Possibly, yeah. It would have been up there in 85, 86, yeah. Well, coming off the back of Los Angeles, I mean, Los Angeles in 84, I probably lost that mantle. I think going into the Olympics, I was the number one, and you know, I'd won the Rotterdam Marathon in 83 and beat Carlos Lopez, and then came out and won the World Championships in Helsinki later on in 83. And then you know, sort of really focused on trying. Well, I did 84 where I'd overtrained, and then had to redeem myself a little bit. I felt as though I had to redeem myself, and really just focused on being in the best shape for Boston.
Yeah, what you didn't have in course experience, you certainly made up for in speed and strength. Your first mile, Rob, was 4 minutes and 37 seconds down out of Hopkinton. Did that feel fast for you? What was the pack like at that point? I'm sure.
It's a big pack, and you know, like I said, it's a fast downhill start. So you've got to run fast but smoothly, and the problem always with running downhill is the jarring through your quads and your hips, and if you smash your legs running by jarring too fast down the hills, then it's gonna come back and bite you in the bum later on. But you've got to, you know, it's hard because you've got to run fast, but you've also got to run smoothly. And I didn't notice particularly that we're running overly fast. There was a big pack up there for the first 10K or so. You know, you just relax and run as smoothly and as fast as you can.
You had been training on kilometers. This is a time at which certainly if there were markers on the course, there were for miles. How were you able to do the math? Were you going off of a watch? What were you using to gauge yourself?
Oh, well, just the timing vehicle, just a lead vehicle. So, you know, I like using miles because there's obviously more of them, and you can break the course down into smaller bite sizes. You know, sort of there's only, if you do 5Ks, there's only 8 of those. So you've got to wait a long time between the markers. But I think, you know, for all international runners, you should be reasonably familiar, or try to be familiar with your mile splits, because it is a little bit easier to keep track, and you can break them down into smaller bits. But I can't remember. I don't think I wore a watch, and you just use the lead vehicle. I know I do remember in the latter stages racing against the clock. So every mile the previous split would pop up, and my goal was to make sure that every split was a sub 5 minute mile split. So that was what I was trying to do. So you just keep on pushing, you keep on breaking it down into smaller chunks. Don't worry about the last little bit. Just focus on the next mile and push hard and get through that one. And hopefully you've done the training and you've got the condition and the endurance in your legs to be able to hold it together over that last 5 or 10K.
And you felt, I mean, you hit the halfway mark in 63:38. You by the 18-mile mark, you had a 45-second lead over Barrios. Were you looking back at all, or did you just feel like, if I stick to my plan, it's going to take, no one's catching me?
Yeah, look, I always just race against myself. You know, I use my competitors as an opportunity to get the best out of myself. So, you know, whilst I love winning and always loved winning, if I didn't win, but I felt as though I gave absolutely everything, then I'd walk away feeling proud of myself. Even if I won and didn't feel as though I gave absolutely everything, then I'd probably be a little bit disappointed. So I always just race against myself. You know, the last half of that marathon, I was just racing myself. I knew I was running, I was feeling good, I was feeling strong, and I was just out there, you know, sort of, as I said, racing against the clock, just using every little bit of positive reinforcement that I could to keep on pushing hard.
And you had won the World Championships in 1983 in Helsinki, so you had been in this position before against very stiff competition. So that must have been helpful to have in the back of your mind too.
Yeah, look, yeah, I mean, I've been winning races, you know, since I was 15 or 16. And you know, even when I was a young fella doing cross country, when I was 16, in my approach, even in those little, you know, 5K cross country races, was when the gun goes, you take off with everyone else, and you just gradually pick up your pace until no one can keep up with you, and then you just maintain that pace. And if they can't keep up with you in the first bit, they're not going to catch you if you don't slow down.
That's right.
Keep it simple.
How hard can it be? With all these competitions that you did around the world, you raced people of all backgrounds. The Kenyan infusion in Boston didn't really show up until '88 with Ibrahim Hussein. Had you clashed with some of the Kenyans or Ethiopians in different races? I'm sure at World Cross, but at other marathons and things?
In the Commonwealth Games, a little. So the '82 Commonwealth Games that were in Brisbane, which I won, were the second and third place getters were early on there were two Tanzanians, and so you know we've in the Commonwealth, Kenya is one of the Commonwealth countries, as are, you know, Tanzania and Zimbabwe and others. So I was certainly familiar with the great African dominance of distance running, but you know, certainly since I've retired, since I've finished, the dominance has become absolutely so overwhelming, and I think it is a real challenge for us to find the physiology. There are non-African incredible distance runners out there, and we have to find a way to provide them with the opportunity to get that same level of strength and fitness. And you know, Kipchoge has just taken the African dominance to a whole another level. But I think, you know, sort of we will find those non-African superstars out there, but they're certainly fewer and far further between than the Africans.
Yeah,
big challenge.
Yeah, it seems like the altitude's a big part, whether it's Ethiopia or in eastern Kenya, western Kenya.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of the physiology. There's absolutely no doubt that there is an incredible you know, anaerobic threshold and also an endurance. You know, sort of you have to have your anaerobic threshold so you can run fast without producing lactic acid, and you also have to have the glycogen storage and the glycogen utilization. So you have to have that efficiency so that you can run long. And when you have both the aerobic, anaerobic fitness and also the endurance, you become, you know, someone like Kipchoge, and the Africans, I think, have those attributes in abundance.
When you talk about glycogen, the first thing I think of are like energy gels that you might take along a marathon, or something that really helps refuel and get you some of the sugars and salts that you need. Could you imagine? I mean, what were you taking during these races, if anything, beyond water? I mean, could you imagine these gels that are just little sugar packets? I mean, did this stuff exist?
No, certainly not when I was racing. I mean, I've got a science background. You know, I did a degree in science, and before I started professional marathon running and distance running, worked at the Institute of Sport in the physiology lab there, and worked closely with the head physiologist, Dick Telford, and we did a lot of work looking at the fluids back then, and we experimented with a glucose polymer called polyglucose that was actually, back in those days, was used in the intensive care units in hospital to provide energy nutrients to the patients. So, you know, we were experimenting a little bit with putting different levels of glucose and polyglucose and other things into my drinks. And then you also, you know, have your electrolytes as well. So for me, you know, I've always been on the bigger size of the spectrum for marathon runners, and the bigger you are, the more you struggle in the heat. So I always found it really difficult in the championship races. The Olympics, World Championships, Commonwealth Games are always held in the summer, and when you have big muscles, your muscles produce a lot of heat. You have a smaller surface area to muscle mass ratio, so the tendency is that your core temperature will increase. And so, you know, you try to always find the physiology attributes or training mechanisms that you can use to try to cope with the load that you're going to be putting on yourself. But we never had gels, you know, and you know, they're obviously, I think, a great innovation, as are, you know, GPS watches and you know, and spring shoes and all these other technologies that have come in since I well and truly hung up my shoes.
The shoe thing that would be the second hour, Rob, of our interview. I mean, I want to ask, but I guess just give me 30. I mean, the shoe thing. Do you want everyone to just have an even playing field, or is this moon shoe thing out of control? What do you think?
Well, look, the cat's out of the bag, so there's no way you're going to bring it back. So I think the only thing is now that every shoe company needs to develop something similar, and it is difficult when it's patented. But I'm sure there's enough creative shoe engineers and biomechanists out there to come up with similar sorts of benefits. But it does make it really difficult if you want to do any historical comparisons. But you know, shoes have evolved all the time. You know, I look at the shoes that Derek Clayton ran in when he set his world record in Antwerp back in the 60s, and you know, they were just like running on a piece of cardboard. You know, and you know, he had the injuries to prove it. So, you know, sort of the shoes I ran in were so much better than the shoes that the marathon runners of the previous generation ran in. So, you know, it's probably not fair to compare my times with their times. And now, you know, it's just evolved to the next level. But the big thing is, I think it just needs to have that even playing field. I don't think it's fair to have certain athletes who are getting an advantage over others.
You ran 2:07:51 as a 29-year-old in the 1986 Boston Marathon. You won prize money of maybe 25,000, or maybe it was 30,000. It all added up to 60,000, I think, plus a Mercedes Benz, right? Okay, what side of the road was the Mercedes Benz built for? Because I was just thinking, like, what are you going to do if they give you a Mercedes Benz and you can't drive it back in Australia?
Well, that's what I drove in Boulder. So I used it when I was in the US, just to put it in the garage. When I came back to Australia for when it started to snow in Boulder, I'd park the Mercedes in the garage, and I'd pack my bags, and I'd come back to summer down here in Australia. So it was a pretty good training regime.
What a way to pull up with, you know, the great runners who had all congregated in Boulder, and you guys all go meet up for your run, and you pull up in the prize from winning the Boston Marathon. I mean, that must have felt good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my! What color was the car?
It was sort of like a burgundy, I think, like a good red wine.
There you go. Well, hopefully you've had the chance to tell these stories over a couple of glasses of red wine over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're just about out of time. You are Australia's first world champion. You're a 4-time Olympian, and the 1986 champion of the Boston Marathon here, Rob D. Castella. Thanks for joining us, Rob. It's been great to chat with you.
Thanks, TK. You guys have been a really important and a really significant part of my life and my career. I love coming back to Boston and reconnecting with family, and I really look forward to being able to do that with you all in the near future. So much love, much respect, and look after each other there, and we'll see you down the track.
Yeah, that's right, Rob. And one last time, the URL for the IMF, is it just imf.org?
.au, imf.org.au.
Yeah.
So please, and anyone who's interested in seeing the power of running, following some of the inspirational stories of our graduates, you can follow us either on our website or just search Indigenous Marathon Foundation on Facebook, and there's a heap of profiles and stories there as well.
Great. That's great.
Thanks,
well, Rob, thanks again, mate. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
You bet. Cheers.
Stay safe.